not as though it's been a massive failure. We did have to go through a civil war to overcome some of its deficiencies, but I think it's done pretty well by us. There's also a deep contradiction between what some people have to assume in order to favor a convention, to make deep structural changes. They have to assume that it's all up for grabs, that Article 5 is not going to be binding, that, for example, the rule that every state gets the same number of votes isn't going to be binding, and the point of view that others who want a convention for a more substantive purpose, like getting rid of Citizens United, or reducing the powers of the national government, or increasing the powers of the national government, those substantive objectives, the people who favor a convention to do something substantive tend to fall back, as the introductory materials for this conference do, on the idea that it all is going to fit neatly into the existing Article 5 framework that takes 3/4 of the states to ratify. Well, that's an assumption, of course, that you can't make if you really want to put the whole structure up for grabs. Now, there are people like Barbara Perry who argue that even though these legal questions are unanswered, that there are something like half a dozen political constraints, although she included a Supreme Court check as among the political constraints, and I have my doubts about that. There are political constraints that can substitute for the legal ones under our current situation. But it seems to me that the very thing that is said to make a convention essential is the supposed failure of our political process, its polarization, its paralysis, its capture by special interests. And to rely on that supposedly failed process in order to provide a backstop so that putting the whole Constitution on the table up for grabs is a good idea at this point in our history seems to me to be to sort of live in two different worlds at once. One world that says ordinary politics has totally broken down and we can't trust it, and the other world that says we can trust ordinary politics in order to make it a safe bet to put the Constitution on the table up for grabs. Now, it's true, I'm not suggesting that we should never do that. There are times in our history when it was appropriate. I think 1787 was such a time. And the reason is that even though, as Larry Lessig said at the beginning, there were the deepest divisions between those who believed that slavery should persist and those who wanted abolition, there was at least a general agreement